practices and strategy.
I think I hand over to Sarah right away, maybe to add that I've started to work for the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi from the Salomon Air Guggenheim Foundation 2 years ago, and have before had most of my practice in the UK, a little bit in Australia, and I'm originally German, and that's where I was right before I moved to Abu Dhabi.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Sarah bin Safwan. I'm a curator at Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, working for the Department of Culture and Tourism in Abu Dhabi. I've been working for the project for almost 8 years now. I started as a researcher. I've been witnessing a lot of growth over the last almost decade as well. So happy to join this panel today with you all.
You want to go first or stand there? Oh, you stay here. Yes. Yeah. You don't mind. Yeah. No problem. Yeah.
Well, I would like to tell you a little bit about our experience. That is experience not of great successes, but of trials and mostly errors. And I think we are learning, and I wish I could transmit something useful to you on what we have failed or issues we should have done better. This is the museum. We opened it 2019 with great enthusiasm, but we didn't start with the right question. That was why. We should have asked ourselves, why should we start with a museum? But we started because a collector gave some works, because the university thought this is a university museum. The university thought that it was nice to have a museum. I thought that it was an escape from me from battling the architectural, but we didn't thought it well. And that was a real problem. And I think this is crucial for the programming, for the exhibition, for the education, and it's crucial also for collecting. If we, or museum, or anybody is not clear on the why, on the mission, on the purpose of the institution, it's very difficult to be successful on any of the aspects that I mentioned. So something that surely you all know, but I would like to emphasize is that the foundation of effective collecting is a clear mission. Why are we collecting? And it may seem obvious. We are collecting because collecting is good. But why is it good? And is it really good? Do we really need it? Is the only approach? Is the base approach for everybody? It depends. And this is something that we didn't have clear, and we have been moving. We were lucky. We were one of the few lucky people who were affected by COVID positively. For us, COVID was very good because it allowed us to think. We were launching a museum, then it was 2019. Then a few months later, we closed the museum for almost a year. And we continued working, and we had time to think. We did then our strategic plan, and that involved plenty of discussions and thinking about issues mainly on this, on the why. Then we came to the conclusion, or we have come, it's not that initially we were clear, we are coming more and more to the conclusion that for us, and not only collecting, but all the aspects of the museum are mission-driven. What type of museum are we? We are in a university, so we are a university museum. But there are many types of university museums. There are, especially in the US, as you know, some, especially small universities, have a museum that is mostly dedicated to serving the university community. In other places, university museums have a much broader audience. What type of museum we want it to be? How is this affecting the collection? We started with 1,000 works from the donor, plus around 200 works that were in the university collection, but were in the university rather. It was not a collection. And we have been getting, we have an acquisition budget of 0 since the beginning, but we are getting some works. So for us, these questions were crucial. Who is our primary audience? And here again, it has been a failure. When we started, we say, full of enthusiasm, and we thought we are serving Nigeria. Then COVID came and said, but nobody can come to the museum. Whom are we serving? And we said, but perhaps we can move on the virtual world, and then we can serve everybody, the world. We pass from having our main audience being Nigeria to saying we can produce things that are useful globally. Then COVID finished, and then we realized that we are only 5.5 members of professional staff in the museum. Say half because I work part-time and a part-time director. So there we are. And then we move from national to global, and then we say, no, our community, we have to serve our community. We are in the outskirts of Lagos, first Lagos, but our immediate community. And then now we are saying, but what about the university? Shouldn't the university be our primary audience? So I'm not putting ourselves as the right example. No, we are trying to figure out. But in the process, we are learning a good number of things. And little by little, we are clearer about where we want to go. Whom are we serving, really? A small museum like ours cannot serve everybody. And now, how do we serve, for instance, the university community when we don't have a fine arts department in our university? How do we serve them? Do we entertain them? Are we a tourist attraction? How do we serve engineering students? How do we serve accounting students? How do we serve them? So this is a process of rethinking, something that perhaps we should have done earlier, but we didn't. For a museum like ours, where the focus, by the way, when we prepared the first strategic plan, we made a wonderful mission statement. Now we are working on the 25, 29 strategic plan, and definitely we are going to change our mission statement. But there is something that remains there, and it's a word that is service. And serving whom? We are not serving. For us, the primary focus is not the artwork. We are an art museum where art is not at the center of our concern. Not that we don't care about art, obviously we care. Artists are not at the center of what we do. Again, not that we don't care about artists. Being a tourist attraction is not in the list. Being a repository or being a place where a heritage is preserved, documented, is not that we don't care, not that we don't want to contribute, but that's not why we are there. We are there to do something. So when we talk, for instance, about repatriation, again, not that we don't care. If we were in the National Museum in Nigeria, this will be a primary concern, but we are not. And even if some of these words that are coming back were to be offered to us, we will say, are we the best place for this? Shouldn't they go to Benin or shouldn't they go? So repatriation is not our main concern. So we have been thinking of how to prioritize what it is our main concern, that is to foster interaction, reflection, learning. We don't teach, but we want people coming there to learn. In the university, we repeat it once and again to the lecturers, to the professors, to the departments. What is our primary mission in our university? Helping you with critical thinking. And then they say, but you are an art museum. And then we tell them you have labs where you do practical for the people in physics, in in engineering. You have libraries where you have books and this. You have other places in the university. We have in the university a place that is the most suitable place for critical thinking because we can engage your students in a way that you cannot in a classroom, just facing the students and tell them, boys, girls, and we are going to teach you to think critically. It doesn't work. You have to engage them. And this is our priority. So we see the collection, and obviously I say that this is not definitely not the only approach to a collection, and it's not even the best for everybody. But for us, we see it as a tool, not the goal. So we are not a collection center museum. If we were in many of the big museums, the collection is the center. For us, it's not the center. It's a tool. And this is something that we didn't have clear. Now we have it clear in our mind. What do we want to do? Why do we have a collection? I can tell you a little. There in the museum is almost like a joke now. I go there and frequently, not every week, not every day, but very frequently, I meet one of the other 5 and say, oh, today this. And then they know that most times I am going to ask them a question. They know what they are going to answer, and I know what I want them to answer. So we cross in a corridor, say, oh, how is it? Why are we here for? And then they laugh a little bit, say, oh, yes, I know. We are here because we want to offer a service. And then they tell me more or less the mission statement. Now, this is entering there, and we are emphasizing it. At the Jemisi Shillong Museum of Art, or YSMA, we don't have an acquisitions budget, but we look for artworks with the potential to help us achieve what we want to achieve. So the artworks are at the service of that educational purpose. So they are, when we engage normally, whether they are students from the surrounding communities, whether they are other visitors, teachers, artists, the works that we want to emphasize, to use, are at the service of these experiences that are mostly educational in a broad sense of the word. They are there not just as the collection, our assets. No, they are our tools, not our assets. Though we are privileged to have, I don't want to say the best but a pretty good collection, especially of not traditional, of modern and contemporary, and especially modern, in Wonwu, Grillo, Okeke, all the masters of the Nigerian modernism, the 60s, the 70s. We have a pretty good, and this is an asset. But again, for us, it's a tool also. By the way, all these works that I am showing are from our collection. It's a way of advertising a little bit. Now, we have questioned ourselves, do we really need to collect? We already have 1,300 works. The museum is very small. It's only 1,250 square meters of display area. At any moment in time, we cannot display more than 250, perhaps a little bit more if we were to put them very tightly displayed, but let's say 250. So we have more than enough for our mission. So do we need to bother or to try or to pursue a collection policy? As a question that we ask ourselves. Could we, as an institution, not as a collector, or not, can we as an institution, or could we as an institution achieve the same impact without gathering, amassing a collection of physical works? Could we, if tomorrow there were to be a fire there in our museum and we were to lose all the works, could we still do something to have an impact? And perhaps we could. If you were to come today to the museum, you will see that half of the museum is now hosting an exhibition with works that are not from our collection. We invited 6 of the top collectors in Nigeria to select some works from their collections. Then a curator put it together, and then we are trying to explore how Nigerian collectors collect Nigerian art, not how collectors in New York collect African art or Nigerian art, but what patterns, what ways what similarities, what differences, and all these works are not ours. They are not in our collection, but our sense of mission or trying to achieve something, I think we can achieve it with this exhibition. Could there be a danger of giving too much importance to the collection? 5 minutes, all right. A couple of slides more and we go. Yes, there could be a danger in our case. If we were a different type of museum, no. Do we at YSMA want to have the best collection in Nigeria? Yes. Is this a strategic priority for us? No. We don't want to have, not that we will not happy, we're happy to have the best collection, but that's not our priority. I have 8 questions. We don't have time. I wish I have time to ask them to you. How can museums endure? Issues, 8 questions. I can ask you later on. What do you think that, for instance, the acquisitioning, a dirty word in certain museum areas, is it really a dirty word or not? I'm not saying that I'm proposing, but so we will, these 8 questions, I will leave it for another occasion. And I finish with this, the importance that I think, the importance of having a properly articulated, mission-driven collection strategy, not simply the more the better, not necessarily. And this is it, conclusion, the collection at the service of the audience. So collection coming second. Thank you.
Click it to the next one. Click it to the next one. Because if they won't be able to see. Okay, thank you so much, Jess, for starting the conversation. We're being asked to talk about institutional art collecting, looking at various models. Just as a background, I started my career as an educator. I have a degree in education and a master's in educational television. So the first part of my career was actually as a filmmaker. And then I ran, I worked for an international organization looking at environment issues around environment and development issues in sub-Saharan Africa. And I worked there for 8 years before setting up an NGO. And the NGO was looking at telling development stories. So it was in 2011 that I started sort of pivoting in my career from a filmmaker to actually using the resources within the collection that my husband and I had built to sort of look at art for development. So my focus has been on art for development. And just to sort of take a helicopter view, we look at Agenda 2063 and the 7 key aspirations for Africa. What are they? What are we as Africans aspiring to? So 1, we're looking for inclusive growth. We're looking for sustainable development. Good governance, I think, is so key to all the work that we're doing. Respect for human rights. It was very inspiring to listen to Paolo talk about, how human rights was part of the foundation of your collection. A strong cultural identity, a people-driven development. So we're now looking at the whole aspect of community integration and Africa as a global player and partner. So if we're looking at those kinds of goals for our collecting, I was actually quite fascinated by the write-up that you sent on Edward Glisson. I didn't know about him, so I'm learning every day. This idea of a nomadic museum which is tied to the idea of a popular museum, so that the visitor is no longer repeating the footsteps of previous visitors, and they don't know what they will encounter. So this aspect of not being sure when you walk into a collection, what are you going to see? Are you actually even aware that you're entering a collection? I think that's a very interesting discussion and very interesting basis upon which we are doing our collecting. So really the challenges when we're looking at museum spaces around Africa, and specifically now in Nigeria, is that there are dwindling budgets. I don't know who said yesterday that there isn't even a program, that many of the museums don't have funding for a program. So you see that there are a lot of old displays. Maintenance is an issue. We have an energy crisis in Nigeria. So even running a generator when there's no light is a big issue. So a lot of times when you go to the museum, there's no light. So there, the displays are dark, badly ventilated spaces. And then of course, there's a lack of sufficient community engagement. There's a lot of politics around museums, and sort of the issue of sustainability and dilapidated archives. So these are the challenges, these are the everyday challenges that we're dealing with. I'm here to tell you a new story, and this is a story of new possibilities. There is hope, yay! Let's bring art to the people. Let's not wait for the people to come to the art. Let's democratize the access to art, because a lot of the spaces around the world I find are quite intimidating for a lot of people. They don't even actually have the confidence to enter spaces that are art platforms. Who owns the art? And I think that's where it goes back to your presentation. Is it a community asset? Do we believe as a community that this belongs to us? And I'd like to just share with you how to tap into new resources and explore new spaces within our environment. And for me, I always tell people that, we tend to be quite arrogant in feeling that we are the chosen ones. We know about art, we know about culture. We can sit in this very fine lecture room and talk about these great ideas, but what about the person on the street? What about the woman selling granuts? Let's see how we can broaden the conversation. So I'd like to share with you 3 examples of institutional art collecting and developments that we have been a part of, looking at corporate collections, looking at collections within the hospitality industry, and then public institutions. So the first example is Access Bank, one of the largest banks in Nigeria. We were approached to move the bank from the old headquarters to the new headquarters, and they had it's a classic collection that the bank had across the old headquarters, which was I think on 9 floors. They were moving into a brand new building of 14 floors. So the first thing that we did was we took all the art back and we moved it around, and that made everybody very upset. And so engaging with the internal stakeholders is a big issue with institutional collections. What hangs on my wall? What does it say? Does it belong to me? It's been in my office for 20 years. Why are you moving it out? We then created themes for each floor and tried to match the theme with the work that was being done on the floor. So for example, we have a theme like identity, which ties into the vision and the mission of the organization. And we put works that talk about identity and help us to generate new ideas about identity on the 9th floor, which is the floor that is the HR department and communications. So who are we as a bank? Who are we as a team? And how do we come across? What is our identity? Also juxtaposing art with function. So for example, I had a lot of fun in the boardroom because I put this big work by Victor Butler from Ghana with lots of eyes. It's called Witness. Like, you guys, you're making big decisions in the boardroom. Remember that, we're watching you. We're watching you. Outside the boardroom, I put some photographs by George Osudi, which shows the poorest of the poor, people in slums. Like, remember that the decisions that you're making affect people all over. On the third floor, we have art from across Africa. We really looked at the collection as it was 4 or 5 years ago, and it was quite flat. Lots of male artists, lots of paintings. There was no sculpture, there hardly any sculptures. There were very few, works in mixed media. Ceramics never, didn't exist. And so trying to increase the diversity of the collection was a big challenge. In the Port Harcourt office, we then moved to Port Harcourt, created a new collection there. Port Harcourt is in the Niger Delta region. It's very restive. There's a lot of, bad feelings about what's going on in the Niger Delta. So the work there is a lot more political and also trying to bring in more local artists to be represented. So each place that we curated has a different personality. This is another example. Hogan Lovells is a law firm in London. This type of model, I would say, is a pop-up thematic exhibition. We were invited twice to curate Black History Month in England. And so it's the model where the gallery or the artists bring their artwork to the institution for a short period of time. And we had diverse media, including spoken word. What was really interesting, and I always tell people, when you have a gallery or when you have a museum, how many people walk through your building or your gallery space in a week? Here we have 1,200 people walking through the display every day. They go to work in the morning and they come back. So in terms of impact, and that's what we're after, how does art change our view of life? And these are people who don't necessarily know much about Black History Month. It was a very important space. First Allied Capital in Lagos is a small private investment firm. This was a different type of a model. It was an art loan model. So there's a very large collector in Nigeria. His name is Femi Akinsoya. He has a large collection. He actually happens to be the chairman of First Ally. So they had no art at all. And I've worked very closely with Femi over the years. And he said to me, I want you to take 50 works out of my collection and put it in First Ally. So that was a very exciting assignment as a curator because I could pick whatever I wanted. What I wanted was not necessarily what the stakeholders wanted. For example, he has a very big and significant collection of traditional artwork, traditional, old pieces, and those were rejected by the stakeholders who didn't feel comfortable having these in their building. So again, you're dealing with the community and you're dealing with people who live within these spaces and work within, not live, but work within these spaces. So there's a negotiation and we're moving small, but we're not there yet. But at least people are starting to really look at art as something to be proud of. So with this model, we discussed and we had to put up loan structures, valuations. Restoration and care is a big issue. One Christmas, we were called on the first week of January because they had done renovation within the building and didn't think of covering the artworks. So a number of the artworks were splattered with paint, and so you're dealing with how do you care for artworks within a space where people don't always appreciate the value of these works. So it's a challenge. It's not always easy. And the last example from private sector is art and hospitality. The Wheat Baker Hotel was set up in 2011, and they called us to buy art for the hotel. And we thought this is actually very boring. You just buy art for the hotel and then that's it. Why don't we create a new art platform for artists to come and show their work? And out of this grew a strategy where we had quarterly art exhibitions for artists We show traditional work, contemporary, modern. We work with collectives. We've done this for 13 years and it's been amazing. With every exhibition, the artists they don't have to, but they can donate a work to the hotel. So the hotel has now built up a significant collection of works that are from Susanne Wenger to Bruce Onabrokpaya to some very young and exciting artists. So how do you build a collection with ideas, but really no budget? And this is a wonderful example of how, you know, the hotel has a space and they have hospitality and you have the content. It's a win-win for both. So the arts in the hotel has become a valuable asset. And I think the most impressive for me as a curator is that the hotel staff love the art. You know, when we come and we put up a new exhibition, the cleaners, the doormen, they all have an opinion about the art. And when someone wants more information, they call me personally and they say, you know, there's a collector from New York or from wherever, Singapore, who wants the art, who wants to buy some of the art. Some of them are for sale, some of them are not for sale. But in terms of moving the heart of the organization, the staff are those that are going to tell the message of the art. The Lagos Court of Arbitration, I was very, very kind of moved when I heard about the museum dynamique that had now turned into a courtyard. But I give you hope, because even there you can show art. Imagine that. So the Lagos Court of Arbitration was a new court that was set up as a legacy project by one of our governors. And it's a beautiful building with 4 floors, you know, just very, very state of the art. And we collaborated, we were invited to bring art into the building. We collaborated with Bruce Onabrokpaya and brought over 300 works by 100 artists. And this was an amazing opportunity. We trained graduates to work as interns and as tour guides and learned the art of actually tour guiding. We organized daily tours. We had a film screening room. We had a sculpture gallery. It was a very excellent collaboration. I just want to end with the National Theatre of Lagos. This is the public institution collection model, where an organization has a huge collection which is in a state of disrepair. The National Theatre was built in 1977, and at that time, it was to celebrate Festac. It was actually opened in 76 for Festac 77. And a young artist, Raboye Mokpae, who Victor actually already spoke about in your presentation, was commissioned to try to work with artists to put amazing artworks in the building. And the building actually has over 70 large-scale modernist works. I mean, massive works, mosaics and friezes, polyester resin friezes, really huge sculptures. But unfortunately, the National Theatre went into disrepair. And about 4 years ago, a patron, an art patron called Herbert Wigwe, who is the chairman of Access Bank, went to the building and saw how badly it was, in what terrible state it was, and decided to come up with an idea to get his banking friends to support a public-private partnership. And so they developed a committee, the Bankers Committee, who worked with the Central Bank of Nigeria, and they funded the refurbishment of this building. This just shows you the scale. They're massive, massive works, which we then were mandated to preserve, to protect, to move out if we could move them out. You can see here some of the brass panels that are stretching sort of 15, 20 meters. There were huge sculptures. Some of them were cemented into the floor. We had to move those out. The place was in a terrible state. The sculptures were literally all over them. Some of them, I mean, it was just terrible. And so we did a lot of restoration work with over 100 artists and conservation experts from different parts of the world working with us as advisors. This is the external frieze, which was in terrible condition. At the bottom, you see the restored frieze with the Queen Idia mask on the left-hand side. Again, I worked with an artist, George Edosian, and his team of artists and restorers. And literally every day for the last 4 years, we've been on site. We recovered a lot of historic objects. Nobody who had any sort of asthma could ever have worked with us because we were in the bowels of the building for weeks, going through storerooms that hadn't been opened for 30 years and collecting publications and theater tickets and posters and all kinds of interesting stuff. And then also trying to bring out all the old equipment, all the old film equipment. You can see down here where we're moving an old film projector. As we were moving it, the floor caved in. So this was a very, very delicate job. This is what it looks like today. We created an archive. We have over 1,000 very interesting objects, which we are going to hopefully put into a future museum. And there's a database of historic objects as well. So we have cataloged it. Everything has been photographed, measured, described. So it's going to be an open source for researchers around the world. So in conclusion, this is after the restoration. In conclusion, what are the challenges? We really need to come up with creative funding ideas because they do exist. We have a lot of resources in Africa. Come on, we're very rich people. We like to put our money where sometimes it's not that necessary. We need to have long-term sustainable government support. Even during this project, we had a government change, which affected us. Again, there needs to be community engagement. We need more focus on documentation, sustainability, and actually living through the politics. This is my last slide, Salah. There are great opportunities in Africa. There are great opportunities. We have a vibrant culture. We have fresh historic and contemporary narratives. Our stories are the sweetest, I'm telling you. We have strong artist community. Artists are there working with us and are open. I mean, they're open to engage. We have available spaces. We just need to look, beyond government buildings. We have a young, teachable population. I've never engaged any African youth wherever I was around the continent that were not interested in learning and progressing. So we have a very teachable, vibrant population of young people. We have resources, we have rich national monuments. We can get private sector support. It's just talking the talk of private sector. It's a little bit different when you're presenting and pitching, but in the end, they do get it. And there's a growing global interest in African art. Let's not forget this. The whole world is interested in African art. So this is the time, ladies and gentlemen. And I lost my last slide, which is not there. The sky is the limit. Thank you.
Yeah, we can work together on this. Thank you so much. It's very interesting to hear about your institutions and your projects and the amazing work that you've been doing. Guggenheim Abu Dhabi is a little bit different. We're starting from scratch. We have been a project that has been ongoing for almost the last 15 years since its implementation, and now coming up right to the end line, the finish line. The collection strategy is based on how do we look at the art historical canon and decenter it from the Western art narrative. So what does that mean when we're collecting? We're looking at majorly involving our research and acquisitions from artists and art movements and schools from West Asia, North Africa, and South Asia, which is our main directive, whilst also including global art movements as well from around the world, and then sort of piecing them together in a very overarching timeline to see and resurface how much of these movements have been underrepresented for so long. And yeah, what else to add there?
Maybe to add that the collection starts in 1960. So from onwards, then we're collecting to very young generations. It's a collection which started in 2008. So it's when we open, it's a bit less than 20 years. So it's really a long project. And Sarah has been part of that since nearly 10 years. And many other fantastic curators have participated in building this collection. Which is the DNA is really what was the transnational, the transcultural. So to really think about the connections between different places. So very much, of course, also in the early years, when the main curators from the SRGF side were in New York, there were a lot of collecting also from key American artists. And now in the last probably 10 years, really also seeing what are these relationships and how can we build them. And now with like a whole group of curators together with Shabir Hussein Mustafa, being based in Abu Dhabi for the first time, kind of people from the SRGF side really being there. We kind of working even more closely together in filling what we feel are the necessary discourses for the first collection display. So I think it's interesting also to, I think going back to Jess was what you said, or also would you say that collections are like archives? No, I mean, we are building since now then nearly 20 years and a collection which can be read differently. And so we're really engaging with this idea that the collection display is not something which is going to be there for an eternity. So we're trying to really keep this process of thinking and rethinking as a very active part of the institution. So the one side is the collection building, and the other one is really the question around the collection display. And what do we think we want to foreground when the museum opens? And I think these are different things. And I think they're kind of course, informing each other, but we also try to keep the collection building open and allow for other voices to come in when the time is ready. Maybe to talk a little bit about the building, because obviously a collection lives within a building, and a museum is much more than a building and a collection. So we have 20 galleries, which will be partly for collection, partly for special exhibitions, partly for educational purposes. We have now a bit over 100 works by around 500 artists. So we're planning to have the whole collection in the building, which doesn't mean that everything is displayed in a conventional, traditional way, but we will have areas which are more kind of for research and education, where we see the collection shown more densely. It is an enormous building. So when I hear about the mobile museum, we're not mobile. We have to be mobile in our minds, because the building will stay there for a little bit. While my son always says, because you've seen the pictures yesterday, he always says it's like a boat and it's about to take off, because you have that bridge. So it has this Frank Gehry interest, especially in the kind of late 2000s around the sails, the shapes. So no wall is really straight. It's a very dynamic building, which we really appreciate. So we talk a lot about dancing with the architecture, that kind of not having a right angle, like everything is slightly off. And I think that's something which is inspiring also for the collection display, to really think, how can we not just make one statement? How can we keep it open and not negate the existing Western canon, but really as a team with many perspectives to see how can we bring all these perspectives in without confusing our visitors completely. And so there's a lot of amazing conversations. And I think what's exciting, I mean, just reading here on that screen, your mission statement, I had to laugh about us because of course we'll have one, but we kind of rewrite it. You know, we try to rewrite it until the last minute, until someone says you have to put it in a PowerPoint. So this is the state of, you know, trying to kind of every time a new team member comes, we're like, okay, let's kind of start again to look what that mission is for an institution. And maybe to also add that it is really, the starting point is very much a collaboration between the government and a private institution or foundation in New York, but it's also a conversation on a cultural district with many museums. So it is a museum island. So it's not just the Guggenheim, it's also a natural history museum, it's a national museum, it's the Abrahamic family houses. So there is a lot of a kind of building around. And when we hear this sentence about culture is one of the most important mechanisms, then this is really a place, Abu Dhabi, where there is a lot of effort and resources put into this belief that culture will make a difference for the people who are living there. So this is quite exceptional in the way of how the government, and that's also the government is really driving it. And so also to say that the collection we're building is the collection which will be owned by Abu Dhabi, and it's also the resources are coming solely from the government. So it's a very clear statement from the government.
Yeah, and I think also to put it into context about building this type of museum in Abu Dhabi, you know, in the Gulf, in the wider Arab region as well, and to what does it mean to be, you know, collecting such a global collection within that context as well. And I think, as Stephanie had pointed out, you know, the UAE has many, many nationalities, and to be able to represent them within the collection and also share the stories that we have together that have been so long been crossed over, you know, through many lines of trade and economy and history. I think that is also going to be quite telling through the collection display that we have. And
I think what you're saying, the collection is a tool and not as a goal. I think that's very much what we are trying in the way how we want to engage the community through storytelling, to really see how do individual people connect with the collection through their own stories, and trying to minimize that feeling of you coming in a huge white cube, but more as that kind of you entering into a place where you can gather. Because a lot of what's interesting with the architecture is that double of the gallery spaces is actually open spaces. So it's spaces where you can meander through. So there is a lot of that thinking of coming together and this creating of kinship within these nearly public spaces.
And also to add that, you know, I think the collection also represents underrepresented artists and art histories that, you know, we've been told for so long that, especially I think in context of the UAE, that, you know, we've never had art movements or artists exist there, and it's been quite it's not something that is often shared. And now that we're able to share our story through that collection, that yes, we have had modern art movements for a very long time all across the Gulf and the Arab region and within the UAE, and a very progressive avant-garde art movement as well. So to now thread that within a larger art historical narrative is incredibly important to be included within that as well.
Wonderful, thank you. We have at least 15 minutes to ask questions and engage. So Sandra, yes.
Thank you. My question is for Stephanie and maybe Sarah as well. I wish my friend Awa was here as well. Do you have, I mean, I'm quite familiar with the region. I've done residency.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the region. And do you have limitation with what you collect, what you're able to collect and put in the museum in regards to, like, sometimes in the region, they don't allow maybe works that have figuration or human figures or something like that, or maybe the type of material or iconography. Is there any limitation to that, or is there, like, there are certain works that you can't bring into the space because of the environment where you are, you know?
We work very much with the cultural sensitivities. So we really, because again, I mean, it is for the community and the audiences. And I don't believe, and I think no one in our group believes that it helps to put people in this state of being confronted with things you're not really familiar with from the aesthetics. But what we do very much, and I think that's also something which fascinates me living in the region now, that the openness for transformation and the speed of being able to change your perception is unbelievable. And coming, having worked in the UK and in Germany, I just can't believe how quickly people are able to just wanting to transform. And I think instead of trying to hold on to existing structures, there is a constant, encouragement to go further. And that, of course, I mean, that there's also very much the belief that culture will do that. And of course, I mean, Sarah probably can more. I don't know how quickly we, are somewhere else, but just the 2 years I lived there in relationship to dance and performance and choreography, it has been, the way how the audience engages with it and what is shown has changed tremendously.
Thank you.
Thank you all. My question is for Sandra. It's an inspiring story, no? I mean, there are similar case studies across the world of structures that are built in the 70s and then very soon kind of brutalist structures largely that very soon kind of descend into a state of disrepair, if I may call it that. And the recovery of the National Theatre is a great example, I think, especially with the kind of boldness, of the architecture and the kind of significance, I guess, the commissions, right, led to. I had kind of two questions. How do the artists who were originally commissioned to make these works, how do they feel at this moment with the recovery, not with the dilapidation, right? I think more with the recovery. And is now the National Theatre, I also want to know when it opens, because you didn't tell us that. Always hold the last part of the story for later, as we were speaking about earlier. But I think when does it open? And is this part of a broader movement to recover kind of national objects or monuments across Nigeria? Like, I want to know, like, is this forming part of a bigger movement, or is this an isolated case? Yeah.
Thank you, Mustafa. So we're not sure when the museum will open. I mean, when the National Theatre will open. It should open soon. The date is yet to be set. I did hint about politics, changes in government. It has affected the whole issue of how do things continue. The idea was definitely that this would be the first of other monuments. I'm not sure that the political will exists at the moment, although we have a new Minister of Culture who is an artist herself and is very interested in pushing the art agenda. How did the artists feel? I think most of them are moved to tears. Most of them have passed. I mean, many of them are no longer alive. but I had the honor of taking the son of Eraboy Mokwaye, who actually commissioned most of these works through the building. And it was a very emotional tour, and he was very, very happy. What we've done is we've put signage everywhere so that there's information on the artist, an artist statement. It was very difficult to do the research behind a lot of the works. In fact, one of our writers had to go to Benin to actually bring photographs of one of the big, actually two of the large wooden artworks to show the people in the palace, the ministers, the Oba's men, to try and decipher what's the iconography and what's the significance. So the fact that there's no documentation that is still available made it very, very difficult to do the research, but we succeeded. And we've now got QR codes where you can actually get information on your phone, you can take it away. But still, we're also working on an app. So the app will be in 2 languages. It will be in English and Pidgin English. And as you walk through the building, it will give you information, so you can listen. There's an audio track. The app is a very complicated thing because there's also challenges with signal. It's supposed to be a geopositioning app so that wherever you are in the complex, it'll tell you what artworks are around you. We're still trying to complete those, but I have to say that now when you go through the building as an artist, there is information, and there will never be a time when you walk through a building like this and you just don't have any information at all about who did the work. I mean, one of the pièces de résistance is stained glass of Yusufu Grillo. Amazing. I mean, most people didn't even know those existed because the building is so huge. I went as a child to see plays. I saw Ipitombi, I saw so many wonderful plays at the National Theatre. But of course, as a child, we were not allowed to go to the VIP section where a lot of the artworks are. So now, again, it's the democratization of these spaces and allowing people to actually come in and enjoy them.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to resist a little bit the concept of art as a tool, as we were discussing Glisten yesterday. And I think one of the most powerful aspects of art is that, yes, you can always point to something it really says, it really wants to say, it's putting forward, but there's always something, but it's impossible to say that this or that artwork is not talking about this and that. So there are some aspects that are very denotative, so they are upfront, that's okay, but you can never really control the underline, the hidden lines, or the rereadings that history and people will make of art. And that's the beauty of it and the powerful aspect of it. So I understand, of course, where it's coming from, but I think it's important also. And I think in those fragile contexts that we come from, because our museums burned, our buildings are derelict, our archives are destroyed, and so on and so forth. If there is one aspect of the Eurocentric Western knowledge that we should grasp into, is the aspect of this promise of museums and institutions as something that are meant to last forever. And I think it's the most powerful idea, that you can have a structure that will preserve forever something that we cannot really understand completely. And that's okay. That's the good aspect. Like, this is, to me, like the great civilizational promise of everything we are doing. So just to resist, I don't know if there's an answer.
I fully agree with you. In our case, perhaps I didn't explain it properly. when I say a tool, it's not a tool for us to tell you. It's not our tool. It's a tool to help people, the audience, to think about it. So we are not teaching anything. We don't have a from top down narrative to tell you. We are not using the artwork to tell you something. We want that artwork to help you think about something, to explore you, to interiorize, to question you or the visitor. So, and I think that's valid. The same way that a good work of literature can spark questions. We would like our works there to spark questions that people, because we are not teaching anything, we repeat to everybody, we are not going to teach you anything, but we would like you to think and to learn something. But learn is self-directed, not us telling you what to learn. So yes, I agree with you, and I think it's a very valid point, but at the same time, we are taking it from a slightly different approach.
Well, thank you, Sarah, Stephanie, Jess, and Sandra. Thank you very much for this. A break for the last fun. Okay.
Should we announce it?
Hello, so it's actually 1 hour lunch break. Upstairs, like yesterday. Yes. Which table? The chair of Chebujen. Oh man, the Chebujen man is gone.